Across the country, around the world, we're united by one thing: the planet. It is our responsibility to protect it. We need great people to remind us and inspire us to do so. Every country needs a David Suzuki, and we are lucky to call him our own. Come on tour with me, and I'll show you who the greatest Canadian is. Come on, Canada.
Welcome to the greatest Canadian, and things are getting hot. Just under 2 weeks remain before the final showdown. We'll explain more about that later. First, here again are the candidates. Sir Frederick Banting, Alexander Graham Bell, Don Cherry, Tommy Douglas, Terry Fox, Wayne Gretzky, Sir John A. Macdonald, Lester Pearson, David Suzuki, and Pierre Trudeau. Tonight's nominee can be called a citizen of the world because it's the fate of this planet that concerns David Suzuki the most. Rock star MelissaAufderMaur blazes the trail for the man and his mission.
Touring takes me far from my home in Canada. This is Leeds, England. Industrialization was born here. A time when we abandoned nature and the land to live and work in big cities. I've come to Leeds for a 3-day music festival. 50,000 young people reconnecting to the land and to one another through music. It also gives me a chance to spread the message of one great Canadian.
Reading this really great book about a Canadian scientist called David Suzuki, and that man loves the planet and nature and science more than anything in the world, and he's technically making the world a better place, and it got me thinking, everything that you love can help make the world a more beautiful place.
A beautiful place. This is the Canada that most of the world sees. But there is another side. Canada is not what it used to be. Smog warnings, closed beaches, contaminated fish, genetically engineered crops, destroying the very thing that defines us. Suzuki saw it coming.
If we don't have clean air, clean water, clean soil that gives us our food, and clean energy that comes from the sun, we don't survive.
David Suzuki's warning is the most vital message of our time, or any time. From my window, traveling around the world, I see exactly what David Suzuki is talking about. First, let me make something clear. Suzuki would not like the idea of a popularity contest or this big diesel-guzzling bus. But touring lets me see what's going on in the world and, most importantly, understand his concern for the planet. When he talks, you believe him. I believe him.
We frame the environmental problem the wrong way. There's no environment out there, and we have to interact with it. We are the environment because we are the earth. And
you know that voice, that face, that message.
50 years ago, I wouldn't have hesitated to put a glass in that water and drink it. But today, no way.
This is a tradition.
For 40 years, he's been talking with us about things that really matter.
We must make environmental issues one of the major things that we hold every candidate for office accountable for.
Thousands of miles on tour. The best part about traveling on the bus is the space between the cities. It's so beautiful, so vast, but it's also very fragile. Beautiful places like this need David Suzuki. He's devoted his life to creating an awareness of the nature of things. The air, the water, the earth, our land, our Canada, the place we can't live without. David Suzuki reminds us that we are all a part of nature, dependent upon it for survival. He does it by demystifying the science behind it. For Suzuki, the wonder of the natural world is everywhere.
One of my earliest childhood memories is of a bog like this. The ground undulated and I was afraid of falling through. But in fact, if we look very closely, bogs teem with animals and plants every bit as wonderful and diverse as any we'd find in a tropical rainforest.
That's David Suzuki. Cool, compassionate, and never condescending. So what made David Suzuki the man he is? It has a lot to do with his childhood in British Columbia and a dark and forgotten chapter in Canadian history. It's an amazing story of challenge and survival. It's never easy to start over in a strange new land. Not now, not 100 years ago. Canada is where Suzuki's grandparents chose to settle.
This is Granville Street. Many of the more important theaters and departmental stores are located on this thoroughfare.
Back then, Japanese Canadians were forbidden to vote, but they loved it here anyway. David Suzuki was born on March 24th, 1936. He and his sisters were raised on the edge of Vancouver, Marpole, where city met country. Suzuki's father was an avid naturalist, and he impressed that love upon David from a very young age.
My memory of childhood is constant trips into the forest, hiking, camping, fishing.
Life seemed normal, idyllic, even the Canadian dream.
December 7th, 1941, a day of infamy.
And then, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor.
Within a few hours of the event, Canada was at war with Japan. Fear of attack became suddenly real.
In North America, the Japanese were now despised. It didn't matter if you were born here, if you only spoke English, if you'd never even been to Japan. If you looked Japanese, you were the enemy. The government wanted to take care of the Japanese problem, as it was called. Fathers were sent to work camps, their families sent on trains to ghost towns deep in the mountains.
The memories I have really are being on a train and going off on an adventure. At that age, you know, your sense of reality is so distorted.
In the Slocan Valley at Slocan City, old buildings were used.
The Suzukis were sent here, Slocan City, an old mining town in the BC interior. Herded into collapsing buildings, decrepit, dirty, freezing cold.
I remember a lot of things vividly from the war years in the camps. And most of the memories I have are very heavy. They're very painful for me to think about.
But greatness means you don't give up. Suzuki made the most of Slocan, jumping from grade 1 to 4 in 1 year. Yet, he struggled to fit in with the other kids who were angry at Canada.
Canada was the only country we knew. We were very proud Canadians, and it never occurred to us to want anything other than a Canadian victory in the war. And so what happened is the Japanese kids my age would beat me up.
After 3 years of confinement, the Suzukis and other Japanese Canadians were transferred out of Slocan, once again living among other Canadians.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a special announcement. The unconditional surrender of Japan has just been announced. We repeat, Japan has surrendered and the war is over.
The day the war ended, David tried joining the celebrations. He wasn't welcome. A young kid came up to Suzuki, kicking him as hard as he could, saying the words that would haunt David Suzuki for the rest of his life. "Go away, Jap. We beat you." That betrayal by the country he loved could have made him bitter and discouraged. But not Suzuki. He became more determined to fit in, excel, and become the greatest. Suzuki's internment did something no one could have imagined. His love of nature became more profound. This future greatness came from a young boy's curiosity. Not about the adult world of war and prison camps, but the mystery of the natural world around him. But life in the BC interior wasn't to last. In 1945, with the war over, the Suzukis and other Japanese Canadians were ordered out of BC. They only had 2 options, a one-way ticket to Japan or a new life somewhere else in Canada. And in spite of it all, the Suzukis loved this country and no other. So they boarded a train and headed east. Thousands of kilometers across Canada. The journey was like a lifetime to young Suzuki. He was powerfully drawn by what he saw from his window. A new landscape. A wider sense of the natural world and of his country. They settled in Leamington, Ontario. The rural land was different from what he had known in BC. But nature eased the transition. Beauty was everywhere, the kind of beauty you could chase.
My mother made me a net out of cheesecloth, and my dad made a wire hoop that my mother sewed the cheesecloth around, and I put that on a handle, and I had a butterfly net.
The butterfly net was just the beginning for David Suzuki. Forget baseball cards and comics. No, his life was a laboratory. Dried fish, snake skins, insect collections, and anything else you could catch. The artifacts of a great mind. And a hint of things to come.
Test tube babies, or what some call the bad dream of Aldous Huxley, could very well happen within our lifetimes. Before the end of the century, prospective mothers and fathers may be able to go to sperm and egg banks and to decide on the kind of child they want.
Watching David Suzuki on TV, even in those early days, you'd think it came naturally to him. But performing and communicating is not that easy. Like anything, you have to practice and practice. And that's not easy when you're a young guy. After all, there are a lot of distractions. Suzuki didn't have time for those distractions yet. His dad thought that too many Japanese Canadians struggled with the English language, so every night they went down to the basement to practice public speaking. Suzuki was a determined student, and a great communicator was born. Suzuki became a brilliant public speaker. He learned to connect, winning contests, and by grade 13, elected as school president. Who wouldn't vote for Suzuki if he was running for president? I don't know. But if he was running for school president of my school, oh my God, would I ever vote? But I always vote, because you should vote, because we should vote. Now for the better candidate. Now think about it. From internment camp to student president. That took strength and discipline, and even forgiveness. But on the path to greatness, there were more lessons for David Suzuki. This time his life was about to collide with a revolution down south. And those events would change him and us forever.